share my research, and I'm going to talk a little bit on innovation of catalyst research. But before I start, I want to introduce myself again. So I'm Dr. Owenda, and I'm from the School of Chemical Sciences. So here are my research expertise. I'm in advanced oxidation processes, and mainly I focus on developing functional materials for environmental catalysis. And I also work a bit on waste to resources, which means I convert waste into something that we can use for our daily application. And I'm also into novel chemical technologies for water and wastewater treatment, and finally the bioremuneration and adsorption. So I just want to introduce a bit of Penang. Penang is where University of Science Malaysia is located. Okay, and it's at the northwest coast of Peninsular Malaysia. It's a very nice city, multicultural city with one of the highest population density in Malaysia. So if you look at the photo over here, it looks very beautiful, right? So this is Penang, and I welcome you to come to Penang and visit us when you are free or for your holidays. Okay. So let me just introduce my content. So I'm going to talk about some introduction of environmental analysis. And also talk a little bit on the research that we are doing at USM. And I am going to touch a bit on how we can apply catalysis in waste to resources. And finally, I'm going to cover a bit on the key points of what my presentation is all about. And I will conclude it. Okay. So first of all, catalysis. Now, catalysis in general is a process for us to increase the rate of reaction. So this is an important process because it has a lot of implication in the sense that you can have a lot of benefits from speeding up reaction. For example, if you look at industry, right? Industry, you want to manufacture particular chemicals. So if you use a catalyst, you can increase the production 2 times, 3 times, depending on the catalyst that you use. So that means you are also increasing your profit 2 to 3 times, right? So that's why catalysis is one of the biggest area, and it has wide application ranging from energy processing, fine chemical production, and environmental decontamination. If you look at the diagram photo over here, okay, this photo is industrial catalysis, industrial catalyst, whereas this one is some potential application of catalysis, covering from photocatalysis to water splitting. Okay, so this part has been very well introduced by Professor Karna just now. So I'm just not going to talk a lot on the basics. Okay. So what I'm going to share today is on environmental catalysis, which means that is a catalytic technology that is used to reduce environmentally unacceptable compounds, which means we want to remove pollutants and you want to use catalytic technology to do so. Okay, so for this presentation, I just want to showcase some of the recent innovation in this direction with specific focus on environmental catalysis. So today, we look at the world today, a lot of people are talking about sustainability, right? So sustainability in the sense that we want to make sure that the process that we are doing can be environmentally friendly and it will not cost us a lot, right? So in other words, we are trying to achieve economic and environmental sustainability. So if you look at the very long time ago, during the beginning of industrial age, right, people has been doing a lot of things that are not sustainable. Then, for example, CFC, you know, CFC they use for refrigeration system, right? When they develop this CFC, they sell all those fridge to the public, and a lot of people buy it. Over the course of like 20, 30 years, they start to discover that this CFC can cause a lot of environmental issue in the sense that it will deplete our ozone. So this is not very sustainable. So this is a problem that we have to solve today. So we want to look into what are the ways that we can use to make sure that our goal, our objective, everything is sustainable. We want to achieve a circular economy whereby all the waste that we generate can be handled properly. Okay. So like all research, my research focused on a particular problem, problem of emerging pollutants. So I'm sure most of you have heard of emerging pollutants, but 30 years ago, if you ask someone what is emerging pollutant, probably they will not be able to tell you what is it. Right? One of the reasons why we start to look into emerging pollutant is because of our detection technologies, we start to detect a lot of emerging pollutants in our water, our drinking water. Right? So if you look at the river, if you collect the water sample there, and you do some simple analysis using LCQ-Top or maybe LCMS-MS, you discover that you have a lot of organic matter inside. Right? So what are these organic things? Most of the people will say that it's just normal natural organic matter in 20 years ago. But today, when we really analyze it, it's actually our chemicals, anthropogenic chemicals like antibiotics. Right? And all these antibiotics, pharmaceuticals, personal care products, they are used by humans, okay? And they are released into the river and water bodies unknowingly by us. Okay? So, for example, let me just give you an example of antibiotics. If you look at antibiotics, you can go to the counter, any counter to buy antibiotics, right? So when you consume the antibiotics, it goes into our body. Right? And then after that, what happens is that these antibiotics will serve its purpose. Some of the antibiotics will be secreted out from our body into the environment. So when it goes to the environment, first it goes to the toilet, then it goes to wastewater treatment plant, right? And then because our wastewater treatment plant is not designed to treat it, so eventually it will end up into the environment. So in this presentation, okay, I will talk about how we can use a catalytic technology based on catalytic persulfate activation as a sustainable innovative technology to treat anthropogenic pollutant, which means we want to remove all these unwanted emerging pollutant using the catalytic technology. So let me just explain to you how this catalytic technology works. If you look at the catalyst figure over here, you have this catalyst, right? And then you have pollutant. All these red colored dots, they are pollutant. And then you introduce persulfate into the system, and this persulfate can react with the catalyst through redox reaction to produce a radical. Okay? And this radical can attack the pollutant. Okay? So the important thing about this technology is the catalyst itself. Okay? Because the catalyst will determine what is the reaction pathway and the generated radicals that is produced for pollutant degradation. The catalyst itself can also determine what is the performance of the system. If you use a good catalyst, then of course the performance will be very good. If you use a poor catalyst, of course the performance will not be very good, right? So for this catalytic persulfate activation, a lot of people are using metal-based catalysts. Right? So metal-based catalysts, in fact, they are simpler and more economical compared to other ways of activating persulfate. So persulfate, you can activate it using other approach, for example, ultrasound, UV, heat, and so on. But of course, the preferred way is metal-based catalyst. Right? The catalyst, by definition, is supposed to be reusable for 100 cycles, 200 cycles, and 300 cycles. Okay? So that's why it's simpler and more economical. Whereas if you use energy-based activation, you have to continuously supply energy. That means the process is not very sustainable. Right. So for persulfate activation, we have two types of persulfate. One is PMS, peroxymal sulfate. The other one is peroxide disulfate. So for PMS, the best catalyst is cobalt oxide. Right. Whereas for PDS, the best one is zero valent iron. Okay. So for catalysis in this area, we have two types of catalysts. One is homogeneous and heterogeneous. This has been covered by Prof just now. Okay. Homogeneous means that you are using the dissolved catalyst, which means that if, let's say you are doing PMS activation, you want to use cobalt, right? You use cobalt salt, you add it into the reaction vessel, and then this cobalt will dissolve in the water and it acts as a catalyst. On the other hand, if you look at heterogeneous catalyst, which means that we are using the solid catalyst itself, okay? Which means the catalyst will not dissolve in water. You put it inside, you will react as a catalyst, and then after that, you can recover the catalyst. Okay? There are many ways where you can recover the catalyst. You can use, you can design the reaction vessel to have a filter to filter off the catalyst. So Of course, today when we talk about heterogeneous catalyst for this application, there are various problems because this is still an ongoing research, right? One of the greatest problem is in terms of metal leaking. So if you use heterogeneous catalyst like cobalt oxide in water, when you have redox reaction, sometimes this cobalt can be released into the water because of the leaching issue. Right? So when this cobalt is released into the water, it will cause secondary contamination. In other words, you are removing the antibiotics, but indirectly you are generating another issue on metal pollution. So this is an issue that we want to address by using our knowledge in material science to design a catalyst that can be used to solve the antibiotics issue without causing any secondary pollution. So we have several strategies that we can use to do so. And here are the strategies. First is to use mixed metal oxides. So if you look at just now, the example that I present is on using cobalt oxide. So cobalt oxide by itself is a single metal oxide catalyst. So if we use a mixed metal oxide catalyst, which means we combine this cobalt with another transition metal. Let's say we want to make it into a spinel structure, copper ferrite, COFe2O4. So this is an example of mixed metal oxide. And this copper ferrite can have a better functionality compared to the original single metal oxide, in the sense that it will provide more stable, more redox active and versatile structure. In fact, sometimes you can have bifunctionality in mixed metal oxides. For example, if you use cobalt oxide, it's not magnetically separable. But if you convert it into copper ferrite, it becomes magnetically separable, which means that you can use magnet to remove the catalyst after treatment. So the second approach is to use metal oxide with support, which means that you decorate the active catalyst on the support. So if you do this by decorating the catalyst on the support, you can actually have the function of the support itself. Let's say if you look into decorating cobalt oxide on magnetic particles, which means the overall catalyst will have magnetic properties which can be used to be separated through magnetic separation. Other advantage of using metal oxide with support is that you can increase the dispersion of the catalyst, you can prevent agglomeration, and you can also reduce catalyst leaching through improved interaction between the catalyst and the support. And finally, this is one of the hottest topic nowadays, is to use carbon-based catalysts. Okay? So carbon-based catalysts like RGO, nano diamonds, carbon nanotubes, and so on, they are very widely studied today, and especially for this application. So one of the main reasons is because if you use carbon-based catalyst, you eliminate the need to use metal. You don't have to use metal at all. You can just use the carbon, and you don't have to worry about the metal leaching. So just to share with you, before I share my research, I want to share with you on several things on the synthesis method, the advantages. So if you look at the literature, right, there are many different ways that people use to synthesize a particular catalyst. You can have co-position, sol-gel, isobuthermal, and so on. So advantage of using co-position is that it's one of the low cost and simple and scalable approach. But of course, co-position, you can have this advantage, but there are also disadvantages. For example, it's very difficult to control the reaction in terms of the morphology. If you want to get a good morphology of the catalyst, it's very difficult to control. Right. On the other hand, if you look at sol-gel method or isobuthermal method, they are better in terms of controlling the morphology of the catalyst. So morphology is important because it will determine whether your catalyst will have good surface area, better functionality, or so on. Okay. So sol-gel is also a very popular approach in the sense that it's low cost, scalable, and reproducible. And sometimes people use this sol-gel to do coating. Right? So we will see later on how we can use sol-gel method to do some coating on ceramic membrane and use it as a bifunctional ceramic membrane. Okay, as I mentioned just now, we have a problem with catalyst leaching, and we can use several approach, okay? several innovation to solve this catalyst leaching issue. And again, I want to reiterate on using mixed metal oxide. We can have several advantages like improved stability, sometimes you have polyfunctionality, and it will have a better performance compared to single metal oxide catalyst. Okay. So just to share with you a bit on my research. So to improve the catalyst, we look into whether we can develop a better mixed metal oxide catalyst. And for the first part of my research, I look into using copper ferrite. Copper ferrite as a catalyst. And what we did was we developed this copper ferrite using a very simple cold precipitation method at very low temperature. And see here we use about 95 degrees Celsius. And then after that, we carry out the simple cold precipitation method. And finally, we end up with this cubic-like structure. So these are the catalysts that we managed to get. And in terms of the performance, what we expect is that this copper and iron, they can interact synergistically to certain redox reaction to give us a better performance. So of course, when you are selecting two different metals to combine, right, we have to make sure that the two metals, they are compatible with each other. We cannot just randomly take one metal and combine. It will not work. We have to first plan what we want to do first before we synthesize that particular catalyst. So for this research, this is what we have in our mind, that copper and iron, they can interact together to give a very good performance. So to show you some of our results, this one, we prepare with low temperature oxidation method, and then we compare with different types of catalysts, prepare using different methods. For example, copper ferrite, prepare with solver thermal method, copper ferrite also solver thermal methods, and so on. Okay. And we found that, of course, our catalyst prepared low temperature method gave the best rate constant. Okay. This is the pseudo first order rate constant, and it is the highest if you compare with other different types of mixed metal oxide, and also this is the single metal oxide. Okay. So of course we are not satisfied because there is still leaching, copper leaching. Okay. You can see here up to 0.9 ppm of copper still leach out from the solution. Although it's within the US EPA limit. So the US EPA limit of copper is about 1.3 milligram per liter. Right, but then leaching is still leaching. We still have to solve this problem, right? So you look at the performance area, it looks very good compared to other catalysts, right? So the next way to really improve it further is to look into another type of mixed metal oxide catalyst. We look into copper bismuth oxide. So this copper bismuth oxide is also a form of mixed metal oxide. And what is good about this catalyst is that it can be used to activate two different types of oxidant, which means it has some bifunctionality properties. Okay? You can use it for PDS, you can use it for PMS. It's quite versatile. If you look at a normal mixed metal oxide catalyst or any single metal oxide catalyst, usually it can only be used to activate one type of oxidant, and it's not reactive to the other one. So for this copper bismuth oxide, you can use it for both PDS, PMS. And for this catalyst, we design it using a hydrothermal synthesis method. So this method is very good in controlling the morphology. Right? So this is our result. This is what we get. You can see that when we control the temperature and NaOH molarity, we can get something like this form, this structure, which is very interesting. Okay. And of course, having this morphology, but if it's useless, then it's not very practical, right? So we take this, at least we compare it. If you don't control the reaction, you will get this sphere. Okay? We compare with this sphere-like structure. So we compare B and A, and yeah, we use it for benzotriazole removal in water, and we found that, of course, this catalyst works very well. Okay? In fact, we compare with other different types of catalysts, and the one with the fancy morphology gave a better performance compared to others. And of course, when we look at the leaching, okay, this is a very important issue. Catalyst leaching is relatively lower compared to the copper ferrite. The copper ferrite that we developed initially has a significantly higher leaching because it was prepared at a low temperature. So if you look at materials, if you prepare at lower temperature, the crystallinity of the materials will be lower. Okay, most of the time it's lower. That's why you can see quite a large amount of leaching problem. So for this one, copper bismuth oxide, we have about 0.2 to 0.3 milligram per liter of leaching, copper leaching, and we are also not very satisfied with this. Okay? So this is something that we need to improve. So, but before that, just to share with you, this catalyst is very versatile in the sense that it can be used to remove not only benzotriazole, you can also use it for other xenobiotics, for example, bisphenol A, sulfacetamide, and so on. Okay, and to improve further on copper bismuth oxide, the next thing that we want to do is to remove completely copper, right? Because we found that if we do this study, and even if we manage to reduce the copper leaching up to 0.01 milligram per liter, right, then that will still be a problem to the environment. So that means copper-based catalysts may not be so relevant if you want to scale it up. So the next thing we will look at is bismuth fluoride. So I consider this bismuth fluoride as one of the best catalysts for this application. And bismuth and iron itself is relatively non-toxic compared to copper and cobalt. Right. So this bismuth and iron, we combine it to make it into a materials, and we control the morphology. And the morphology that we have, you can see here, is controlled by hydrothermal synthesis. And if you look at this, we control it using sodium hydroxide concentration. And if you use about 8 m of sodium hydroxide, you get a cubic-like morphology. But if you increase it up to 14 m, you have this nanoplate-like morphology. So this is significant because if you have nanoplate morphology, the surface area will be higher compared to when you have a nanotube morphology. So this is the XRD. Yeah, this is how Prof. Karna has already explained a bit on how we can use XRD to characterize the materials, the catalyst. Right. So for our XRD results, we found that this is indeed bismuth fluoride. But if you don't use the correct amount of base or sodium hydroxide, you will not end up with getting bismuth fluoride, Bi2Fe409. You will get something else. Okay, so controlling the sodium hydroxide concentration is very important. So as I mentioned just now, if you use 8 m, you will get cubic morphology. If you use 14 m, you will get plate-like morphology. So look at the surface area. It looks very low, right? 12.4 and 4.3 is still very low for catalysis, right? But of course, you have to remember that if you use bismuth-based material, right, bismuth itself is very very heavy in the sense that it has high density, right? So for typical bismuth-based material, 12.4 is also considered quite large. Okay, and the most important thing, of course, is whether it's applicable or not. And we test it for removing sulfur methoxazole, and we get a very good result. We can see that at natural pH, at pH 7, at pH 11, this catalyst is very durable. So this catalyst, for us, we consider this as one of the best catalysts for PMS activation. And we also look into the mechanism, understand how bismuth and iron can interact with each other. And we found that this iron 3+ and bismuth, right, 3+, and somehow promote the conversion of PMS into reactive radical. Right? And in terms of leaching, we use ICP to detect the leaching, and we found that it's very low, less than 0.2 microgram per liter. And this is the detection limit of our ICP, less than 0.2. In fact, it can be much lower. Okay? Okay, so we also look into supported metal oxide, right? So because mixed metal oxide, we did some research, and we found that bismuth ferrite is the best one. We also explore on supported metal oxide to see whether we can further improve something else, our copper catalyst. Okay, so again, supported metal oxide is beneficial because you can improve the catalyst dispersion. You can introduce additional functionalities and improve the stability of the catalyst itself. So let's look at some of the research that we have done to improve it. So at the beginning of the mixed metal oxide, I talked about copper ferrite. So here we also just want to look at whether we can improve copper ferrite if we turn it into a supported catalyst. So what we did was we support it with activated carbon. Okay, we use activated carbon because it has high surface area, right? Which means you can disperse it very well on the support. Okay, and also this activated carbon has adsorption functionality. Right? So which means that you can have synergistic adsorption and oxidation processes together. So what is interesting for this is that we found that if we do this kind of composite structure, we can have two different functions. You can use the activated carbon as an adsorbent itself. That means you can use the activated carbon, you can carry out a normal adsorption process. And then after that, you take the spent activated carbon, you can regenerate it. You can use this redox catalytic reaction to regenerate that catalyst. So another way to use this composite is that we can use it as a catalyst. Okay? So one is as regenerable adsorbent, the other one is as catalyst. Okay? And in terms of the leaching, right, we found that it's significantly lower. Okay? It's about less than 0.1 milligram per liter of copper leach out from the composite. So after that, we also look into another structure. This one is on copper oxide supported on hexagonal boron nitride. So this is one of my recent research. We managed to get this paper published this year. Right, copper oxide, as you know, it will have leaching when you use it as a PDS activator. But if you support it on hexagonal boron nitride, so hexagonal boron nitride is another one very important material that people start to look into recently, right? Because it has a very good adsorption property. It is also very chemically and thermally stable. Right? You take this boron nitride, if you calcine it up to 800, 1000 degrees Celsius, it's still there because it's very, very stable. And it's also very resistant to chemical attack. So if it's in the environment where you have a lot of oxidant like peroxide disulfate, this boron nitride can withstand all this oxidation environment. Okay? So another one thing that we like about hexagonal boron nitride is that this boron nitride is also a copper adsorbent, which means if you have copper leaching, right? If your copper somehow interacts with the peroxide disulfate and it leaks out, the boron nitride can adsorb the copper back to the catalyst. So this is how it works. You have the copper oxide, right? And then you have this support, boron nitride. And when you have activation process through non-radical and radical pathway, right? Then you have some reactive species generated to attack the pollutant. And what is interesting is that the copper leach out, right, will be reabsorbed back on the boron nitride. And after adsorption, you can take this catalyst, you calcine it at about 300 to 400 degrees Celsius, and then this adsorbed copper can turn back into copper oxide. So that means you are not losing any copper. So we look into the application, recyclability. So we only test it up to 4th cycle, and it works very well. Okay. Although you can see some minor decrease in the reaction rate constant. This is probably because the organics get absorbed as well. But after calcination of the spent catalyst, we found that the performance is in fact somehow better than the first cycle. Right? You can see it's almost comparable to the first cycle. And the most important thing is that we did not detect any copper leaching, which means that our proposed mechanism is what is happening. Right? We have the reabsorption of copper by the boron nitride. So that's our innovation on supported metal oxide. I want to introduce to you on carbon catalyst. Carbon catalyst is one of the hot field today. So I am working a lot on carbon catalyst today. And yeah, carbon catalyst itself completely avoid the use of transition metal, which means you don't have to worry about iron leaching, metal leaching, cobalt leaching, copper leaching. Anything that has no metal will not have any metal leaching issues. But then, of course, carbon catalyst has its own problem. The thing is that it's relatively inert in the sense that you need to modify the surface by introducing surface defects and certain functional group that can be used to activate the oxidants. And another one problem is that carbon allotrope, right? Let's say you have graphene nanodiamonds, carbon nanotube. They are very expensive. Okay? They are quite expensive in the sense that if you look at single wall carbon nanotubes, it can cost up to about 2,000 ringgit per gram. Okay? It's so expensive that it's not sustainable to use this as a catalyst for our application. And we did some innovation to solve the inertness of the carbon-based materials and also to look into how we can reduce the cost of carbon-based catalysts. So for some innovation to improve the performance, we looked into doping. Right? We dope this nitrogen functional group on the carbon catalyst. For this study, we look into reduced graphene oxide. So we prepare this reduced graphene oxide and then we dope some nitrogen, which means we introduce certain nitrogen functional group on the surface of that particular catalyst, and then we test it out for removing antibiotics. Okay? And we carry out certain optimization process. We look into thermal annealing method. We use hydrothermal method and combustion method to see which way is the best way to prepare this kind of catalyst. And we found that thermal annealing is the best, and using urea is the simplest and most economical approach. So some characterization that we did using SEM, DEM, look into before and after doping. You can see that before doping is something like this. Right? There's nothing here. Okay? After you dope it, you can see that it's like fluffy-like shape, right? A lot of this kind of shape, a lot of shades here. Okay? So this one, after doping, somehow it improve the surface. You have higher surface area and better chemical functionalities for catalysis. So if you look at the temperature, temperature is very important when you want to prepare something like this, okay? Because it will affect the type of functional groups that is on the surface of the catalyst. So if you look at nitrogen doping, if you use 400 degrees Celsius for your synthesis, you can see a lot of this nitrogen will exist in this one, red color, pyridinic N. So if you increase the temperature, then somehow you increase the graphitic nitrogen. Okay? So the graphitic nitrogen is the one that we want for our application, because graphitic nitrogen is the one that will lead to non-radical reaction, which is a pathway that we want for PMS activation. So next step is to see whether we can further improve the performance by doing a co-doping. Okay? So this one we look at nitrogen doping. The next one we look at nitrogen and boron doping. So the purpose of this is to further improve the catalyst, okay, to have a better performance. So we did a 1-step and 2-step doping process, and we found that this will affect the performance of the catalyst. So just to share with you further things that we did. So we also look into theoretical studies using density functional theories. Nowadays, a lot of people are looking into using DFT to model their catalyst, to design their catalyst so that they can use it for a particular application. So for this, we use it to study the mechanism and how this co-doping can improve the catalytic activity. And we found that if you have this boron attached in this configuration, you can see from the figure here. Nitrogen is over here, and boron is at this side. Okay, this one. So if you have this kind of configuration, right, you will get an increase in the positive charge density of the carbon atom, which means that somehow you can promote catalytic activity, right, by controlling it like this. Okay, so just to share with you some mechanism, if you have this boron and nitrogen been in this configuration, you will have more radical pathway, which means that you can generate a lot of sulfate and hydroxy radical for removing pollutant. Okay, so this is one of my recent interests, looking into how we can reduce the cost of the catalyst, right, the carbon catalyst. So I looked into how I can use bio waste. Okay, in Malaysia and Indonesia, we have a lot of bio waste, right, from agricultural industries and so on. So all these bio waste, they are very valuable materials, right? We can convert it into something that is useful, and then we can sell it to someone. So for this research, right, I look into how I can convert bio waste into a very effective catalyst through doping for removing emerging contaminant. Okay? So just to share with you how I did this, I looked into spent coffee waste, banana waste, sawdust, and so on, orange peel and dried leaf. Okay? And then I take this waste and then I carry out some pyrolysis process at 1000 degrees Celsius. And then, of course, before this, I mentioned urea is the best nitrogen source, right? So I use urea as a nitrogen precursor. And then after that, I managed to get the biochar. This is what we call biochar. When we burn carbon, we get biochar. And this biochar has a lot of nitrogen functional groups on the surface. Okay. So what we found is that this biochar is in fact amorphous carbon, right? And of course, depending on the source that you use, sometimes you can observe some crystalline materials, and this is the minerals from the bio waste itself. Okay. So all these minerals will not affect catalytic activity because all these minerals, they are inert. For example, if you have sodium, potassium, all these, they are relatively inert. And they won't cause pollution. Okay. So what we found is that the surface area after you carry out this treatment increased significantly. If you use a different source, of course, you will have different surface area. The best one is spent coffee and sawdust. Spent coffee, the coffee waste, right? The one that we go to Starbucks and then we buy a coffee, and then they have this coffee powder, that's a waste, right? They will throw it away. So we can get this free from them. So this is in fact what I use as the spent coffee source. Okay? And we found that we have very high surface area, 439. Sawdust also 423. Depending on the source, if you use dried leaf, you have only 118. Okay? And okay, just to share with you some results. What is important is that the source that you use will determine what is the percentage of graphitic nitrogen that you have. So this spent coffee and sawdust, if you use it as the precursor, you can see that the graphitic nitrogen is very high. Okay. These two, they are in general lignocellulosic carbon, right? And they give you up to 46 atomic percentage of graphitic nitrogen. So graphitic nitrogen itself is one of the best functional group for proximal sulfate activation. Okay. So to show you some results, yeah. So as you have higher graphitic N, the degradation of bisphenol A. So this we use bisphenol A as our pollutant is relatively higher with increasing graphitic N. Okay. So yeah, just to share with you, yeah, in terms of application to the real environment. So we test out using DI water. We also use secondary effluent. That means the effluent from the wastewater treatment plant. And also surface water. That means we go to the river water to collect the water. That's considered as surface water. Okay? And we found that, of course, in DI water, you have the best performance. But when you use secondary effluent, right, you have a decrease of performance, not significantly, but just a small decrease. I consider this as a minor decrease. It's because of the presence of other substances in secondary effluent. You have like SMP, soil microbial products, you have different natural organic matters, you have other pollutants in the secondary effluent. So sometimes the presence of these organic matters can interfere to the degradation process, okay? But not significantly for our case. This is one of our recent innovation. This is by my student. She's also from Indonesia. I think she's from UPI also. This is by Julia Zaini. I think some of you know her. Some of the panelists know her. So we managed to publish this paper on how we can convert sawdust into useful biochar. Okay, we want to look into nitrogen-doped biochar, how we can convert using a very simple approach. So if you look at the previous presentation, the slides, right, we use pyrolysis method, and when we use it under the flow of nitrogen gas or inert gas. Right? So we do some thinking, and we feel that if we use nitrogen gas, right, and this, if we want to scale it up, it will be quite difficult because we need to continuously flow in the nitrogen gas. And we come up with something that is more scalable, right? We take it from the synthesis of graphitic carbon nitride, whereby a lot of people, they use something to encapsulate the precursor, and then they close it very tightly, and then after that they calcine at high temperature. So we did the same thing. We put in the sawdust, right, and then with urea, we mix it together. We close it. Okay, we shut this to prevent air from going into the this chamber, right? And then we seal it off very tightly, and we burn it up to 800 degrees Celsius. And we found that after treatment, right, after this preparation method, we get end-doped biochar that works very effectively to remove organic pollutant. This is another one of her work from Julia. She used this wood residue, and instead of functionalizing it with nitrogen, what she did was she functionalized it with oxygen, which means that she don't use any precursor. She just seal it off, and then she heat it up to 800 degrees Celsius. And what we get is something that is also very effective in removing pollutant. Okay. And I just want to highlight some of the recent innovation with my international researcher. This is from Professor Lin from Taiwan. Okay, so what we look into is controlling the cobalt oxide morphology. We control it from tube structure to flower structure, right? And our interest is to look into how we can use different morphology to reduce the catalyst leaching. Okay? And in fact, the catalyst leaching is controlled, but can be controlled very well if you use a very suitable morphology. For this case, the reported leaching is a lot lower, okay, than the normal leaching, normally reported leaching. For example, a lot of people report more than 0.1 milligram per liter, but for our case, less than 0.03 milligram per liter of catalyst leaching. So another one study, also with international collaborator, is on using this catalytic ceramic membrane, right? So this study, we look into how we can coat the catalytic ceramic membrane using using sol-gel approach, right? So you can see slides of the slides here. This is the ceramic membrane, and then we coat it, okay, with this thin layer of catalyst. So our intention is to use this technology and try to see whether we can have this pollutant coming into this membrane, and then it has degradation happening over here at this layer. And then when it goes out from the water, the permeate will be very clean, right? It will not have any antibiotics or any pollutant. So this is one of our recent research. And another one, the properties that can come from this kind of coating is that we can have a self-cleaning membrane, which means that we can clean this membrane very easily by just adding PMS into the system. Okay. So next, I want to share with you a bit on waste to resources, okay, and how we can integrate catalytic technology. Okay.
So, 5 minutes to go.
Okay, so this will be a very quick section. Okay. So for this one, yeah, gasification technology is very widely used to get energy, right? And one of the things that we look into is to look into trying to gasify municipal solid waste. So this municipal solid waste is not a very well-defined waste because it can be anything, right? And because of this, you will have a lot of pollution coming from municipal solid waste gasification. So this is a typical gasification system, okay? And then you can see solid waste, it goes into the gasifier, and you have to remove the particles, and then you have the catalytic removal here, and so on. Right. So what we are focusing on is on the catalytic removal, and yeah, this is the tar that we found from burning municipal solid waste. Okay. So just to go through very quickly, yeah, the innovation for this is that we use catalyst, supported catalyst for this application, and we found that supported catalyst is very durable, and we can use it and very well compared to the commercial catalyst. In fact, it's more durable than commercial catalyst. Okay. And then this one, another one on the supported catalyst, supported nickel and iron catalyst, whereby we found bifunctional properties of the catalyst. We can use it for water gas shift reaction. We can also use it for removal. Okay. And it's very durable, which means that it can withstand all the corrosive gases coming from the gasification of municipal solid waste. So finally, the last one is the carbon nanotubes from plastic waste. Okay. So this is one of our recent research to see whether we can recover something from the plastic waste. So what we did was just to share you this. These are some of the publications we have. What we have is that we managed to get carbon nanotubes. Just to share, this is how it looks like, the carbon nanotubes, if you can see, right? So what we did was we carried out some pyrolysis. This is a pyrolysis process. We carry out some pyrolysis of the plastic waste, and then we use the catalyst to convert the non-condensable gas into our carbon nanotubes. Okay. So finally, the last slides is on the key points and challenges and open questions. You can see a lot of people are preparing a lot of different types of catalysts, and to date, we don't have the best catalyst. We don't know what is the best catalyst, right? So why are people still ongoing and going to prepare new catalysts for publication and so on? The reason is because we are now looking for sustainable and more efficient catalysts. And also another reason is because this is on a case-by-case basis. Okay? So a particular catalyst can be effective for one application. For example, if you want to use the TiO2 for degrading something, right? Then another catalyst, if you have another pollutant, may not be able to use the TiO2 to do that also. So the next one is what is the fundamental science behind the catalytic reaction? What are the mechanisms that we can have? This one we have to study further, and particularly we have to use interdisciplinary approach. Finally, how we can implement this catalytic technology for larger scale application. This is something that everyone have to look into, because we don't want our catalytic technology to be at the initial stage, okay, whereby we cannot just use it. It remains like the lab scale study. It's not very practical to do that. Okay. So finally, yeah, thank you for having me here, and very happy to invite you to collaborate with us at USM, and I'm very happy to invite you to join us at USM to conduct some research. So thank you so much.